It's building the relationship that made the asking stage easier and then the next step easier. This obviously changes depending on the product you're selling, service you're selling, etc. But most audiences need some kind of relationship in order for them to take action, regardless of the service that you're selling.
You're listening to the Let's Talk Marketing podcast hosted by me, Katya Allison. So what have you gotten yourself into? In short, it is going to be a good time. There is going to be great conversation, as well as a little bit of learning along the way. Through insightful interviews with top marketers, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders, I get to explore the latest trends, techniques, and strategies in this wonderful world of marketing. I am here to offer you engaging and informative discussions to help you stay up to date on the latest trends and take your marketing skills to the next level. Now, in this episode, we are going to be covering how to grab your audience's attention and really drive them to engage. And we're doing this with my guest, Josías. Now, Josías brings over 20 years of experience in guiding organizations to really reach their distracted audience. As the CEO and product expert of Pirsonal, he's empowered renowned brands such as Zumba, BMW Financial Services to leverage personalized video marketing for impactful audience engagement. So let's get ready to talk a little bit of marketing with Josías. Josías, welcome to the Let's Talk Marketing podcast. I'm really excited to have you on here, and you're coming in all the way from Spain, which is fantastic. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, I know today our big strategy topic that we're going to really dive into is how a brand can engage. Well, one finds their audience and get them to engage with them. But before we dive into that, what I'd love to do is to have the audience get to know you a little bit better. So I always start with my standard questions. I'd love to learn, what was your first marketing role, or what you would consider a marketing role?
Okay, I think it's a mix. I was thinking about that. On my end, it's being a mix and a transition after the other one. So in high school, I started unsuccessful internet portal that was in the maybe about 15 or 16 or 20 something years ago. And that didn't work out, but it was related to marketing. So copywriting, trying to find partners and advertising and all the things around that. Then while in university, I tried also with a few internet projects. I couldn't work. I'm originally from Panama. I live in Spain, but I'm from Panama. And back then it was my first years here in Spain. So I couldn't legally work, but I needed the experience also while I was at university. So what I did is lots of internships, TV stations, radio, an e-commerce platform as well, a couple of agencies. And then at some point, there was one agency that was a really good home, let's say, for me. I learned quite a lot there. And even after I graduated, I keep working there for a few years. But also at that time, I co-founded one of the first collaborative music applications that was back then in the market. And it was related to marketing, in this case, B2C. And finding investors and trying to put the product out there and value proposition and all those things. So in the end, I see it as a combination of things. So not like one particular field, especially if it's digital, there are many areas that are somehow connected. On my end, it's been related to technology and related to connecting with people and related to the creative side of things and finding creative ways to communicate something. So I cannot say what was my first role because it's more or less a mix of all those things, if that makes sense.
It sounds like you dabbled in a little bit of everything. And I think that you're absolutely right. This is why I actually love to ask the question as well. One, because I love to hear how people connect marketing, like what is marketing? You get kind of the cynical people who just sort of think that marketing is, bumper stickers and fun ads. I don't know, very Mad Men like that show. But in reality, marketing is a little bit of sales as well too. From an investor perspective as well, you need to be able to know how to position yourself. So I think there's a little bit of marketer in all of us. Now that's just where you started. What is your current role? What do you do?
I'm the CEO and product guy at Pirsonal with an I. So most brands out there deal with what I call saturated audiences. So people just like all of us on a personal level with an E in this case, that are busy and constantly bombarded just by a lot of messages. And because of these, people don't pay attention to these messages that much. And especially if we are talking about important messages like benefit and compensation plans or an onboarding message or a contract or even a marketing campaign. So what we do at Pirsonal is that we help these organizations connect with their audiences, usually segmented audiences, through the type of content we all love, which is video and personalization. We do that in a scalable way. So Pirsonal in the end is a flexible, personalized video marketing platform that helps these organizations create video content automatically without concerns regarding experience or scalability or security because of the type of industries we're working. And that's basically what I do. I lead the company. I love creating products, digital products usually, and I enjoy my job.
You fed into the next question, which is about what you do. What do you love? But conversely, if there is anything that I could pluck out of your day and you'd say, oh, I could really do without this, what would that be? But let's start off with, what do you love about what you currently do?
Yeah, there are a few things. I love creating products, finding some kind of need, usually needs organizations have, brands, teams, and so on have, and finding ways to help them with technology, usually fix whatever problem they have. Usually also because of the vision of the company, it is related to engagement, trying to connect with lots of people on a one-to-one basis and at scale. And in our case, we believe that automation can do that in a better way. And that obviously personalization is the way to connect with people within their own context. And multimedia content does just great to basically connect with people as well so that they pay attention and so on. So creating products and trying to find what's the next thing that could really help our clients is something I really enjoy. And in order to do that, I need to talk to a lot of people or speak with a lot of people, gather the feedback, ask lots of questions, which is related to sales, but it's not always sales per se. So that's my favorite part, I would say.
Sounds like you like solving problems in creative ways and you leverage technology to find those creative solutions. I love that. But now that's the other side of the coin. What, if there's anything, would you pluck out of what you do?
Yeah, I don't like the legal stuff. And I like sales. So legal admin stuff, I don't like admin stuff either. I like sales, but I like helping people. But I don't like trying to close a deal because you have to close a deal or things like that. And in our case, this is a self-funded company, so every client counts. And so that's my less favorite part of the process. So legal stuff and sales, I like helping my clients and guiding them through the process and sharing strategies with them and helping them see things that they cannot see, at least at a glance. Well, I don't like the whole sales process, not that much.
No, I totally agree with you. I think that's always the thing that I, as a marketer, have always struggled with, because I think that as a marketer, you are good at selling what it is the value proposition is. And while we all want to make money, right? So I don't want to say that I'm altruistic and I don't care about money, because I do. But at the end of it, my joy comes from exactly what you're talking about. Finding those creative solutions, having those conversations, not having to close the deal and get the deal closed, right? I want that to be the ancillary benefit to helping someone. So I'm right there with you. Birds of the same feather. Now, in this industry, though, I feel like in marketing across industries, you have to be able to stay up to date on trends, things that are happening. So I'm wondering, what do you leverage to stay up to date? Do you look at social media? Are there newsletters? Is there a podcast? Is there a book that you go back to? How do you stay up to date?
It's a mix. I'm a huge YouTube fan, to be honest, pretty much everything. I like reading. I enjoy reading. Every month I have maybe 1 or 4 books, anything between 1 and 4 books that it's not that I read them all, but throughout the year, I advance, let's say, in my reading. And that goes for business stuff, personal, or skills that I need to acquire or things that I would like to learn a bit more about. Podcast, that's more or less when I can get distracted. Like when I go for a walk, I like walking and trekking and stuff. So I use podcasts in those alone times, let's say. I would say YouTube, books, podcasts, and I like reports quite a lot, like papers and industry reports. I go over them quite a lot to find patterns and things like that. I ask lots of questions too. In my case, I have the advantage of many companies I have access to our clients and people come to us. So I'm able to ask lots of questions and you find patterns in their answers. And when you combine all that information, usually you can see trends or new opportunities or things that they are leaving behind that they shouldn't.
Yeah. You have to kind of always be listening when it comes to having those customer conversations, right? Or when you're a product person seeking voice of customer information, right? There are trends. I always find it really interesting that when you do have those customer conversations, you think that everyone's so dramatically different. But to me, there's this walking Venn diagram. We're all different, but we have similarities as well too. And I think as a marketer, we have to be able to hone in on those similarities to maximize it and then use like the outlier, then cater to the outliers, right? Okay, if I'm catering to everybody with this, where are my outliers? And is there something that either my product, brand, or business can help support them? So I'm right there with you. So far, we have a lot in common. Not that you were worried about that, but I'm very excited about that. I think I'm ready for us to just dive into it, especially too, about not just how you and your company can help brands just grab their audience, but more specifically, like how to do it. No, that would be too simple. If it was that easy of an answer, then it wouldn't be like such a top question on people's minds. What I'm curious to know is what are some common pitfalls that you see when you're talking to customers or brands when they're attempting to grab an audience's attention? Is it not knowing specifically the audience, not giving them the right message? Do you find that there's a trend as far as common pitfalls?
It depends on the type of industry, the team behind the initiative, and the type of product or service they're trying to put out there in the market. By product, that could be a bank trying to engage with customers so that they use more their credit cards, or that could be an HR team trying to help their employees to retain employees, let's say, and help them be happier at work and things like that. So it depends. There are a few things I see. Yes, there are pitfalls, but also I think there are good news as well. There is a mix. Generally speaking, I see a lack of segmentation. So many organizations think about their audience as just the audience. They are all the same. And in our case, this quote unquote hurts because we are in the personalization field. However, even when creating personalized campaigns for like personalized video or whatever, any type of content in terms of personalization, there is a huge lack of segmentation. And with that, it also comes a lack of proper engagement throughout with the same audience throughout the journey of that audience. So that could be, again, that could be employees, that could be customers, that could be partners, investors, students, whatever, any type of audience. And that would also take you to the right messaging for that audience, depending on who they are on a more particular level. And then the number of times you engage with that audience as well, and how do you engage with them, the type of content they need to consume or they need to pay attention to in order to perform X, Y, Z action, etc. But then the good news is that I see more teams that are not 100% related to, no marketing teams, that are trying to somehow leverage technology or leverage what other customer-facing teams do to better, or at least try to connect with their audiences. And that's something that I see because of the type of companies that are coming to us, which is changing in relation to how it used to be back in the days or just a few years ago. That's good news, because at the same time, it's frustrating seeing something I see quite a lot is if you have XYZ organization and that organization has a marketing team or communications teams that have access to tools, data, and knowledge, etc. In my view, other departments, other teams that are also trying to reach out to a certain audience could use the same resources or similar resources to perform that engagement task, let's say, successfully. But that doesn't happen. So you would find team A with super fancy tools and strategies and all that, and you'll find team B that is totally lost. That's something that happens quite a lot. And in the end, that causes duplications in terms of budgets, in terms of engagement. It is a lot more expensive to try to get to someone new, let's say, as compared to just loyalty and retention and keeping someone happier, etc. And this goes for any type of audience within the same organization. And this happens quite a lot, regardless of the type of organization, regardless of the size and geography and all that. So those are a few thoughts that come to mind, at least right now.
I think that if I could summarize what you shared, I almost put it into 3 buckets, right? So some of the common, we won't call them pitfalls, we'll call them challenges, because in challenges, there's always opportunity, right? So some of the common challenges I heard you say first is segmentation, which I want to unpack that a little bit too, because I think that there's this misconception of what segmentation is, right? So I heard segmentation and then serving the right content throughout the customer journey. And the last part, probably the best way that I could articulate what you were sharing, is that sometimes brands are moving in too many directions at once. Does that capture, like, if we had to bucket those in like top 3 kind of like challenges when it comes to brands trying to reach the right audience?
Yeah. So regarding the last one, what I would say is that brands, organizations, teams, etc., should share more knowledge, insights, tools with other teams within the same organization. If they do this, they'll be able to save money, save resources, save time. Something as simple as if product team has information about what customers have been requesting and they have already delivered that, because that information comes from support, then that information can also be used at the same time by sales to put a product in the market, by marketing. And the same goes, for example, if you have to compare how internal communications work with how communication, like customer-facing communications, work at the same time, because those are like 2 different worlds. Customer-facing communications are, generally speaking, fancy. They have tools, they have budgets, they have all these great things. That's great. However, internal communication teams don't have HR or corporate affairs and all those things. They don't have the same access because they think they don't have the same needs. But in the end, we are talking about people, and people we all need someone to engage with us or to connect with us throughout our journey with whatever product or service we are trying to engage with. And that doesn't happen much, as far as I understand or see, basically.
Yeah, I think I'm picking up what you're putting down. So where I said people are running around in different directions, what you're more focused on with that third part of common just challenges to reaching your audience is internally working in silos and not sharing information. Okay, that makes sense. I do want to go back to the segmentation part because I feel very strongly about segmentation. So I'd love to dive into a little bit on what you mean by segmentation, because like how granular should we segment, I guess, is more of what I'm asking. Because I think with a lot of brands, they kind of know like the general audience. But when you talk about segmentation and it being a challenge, is it being too broad with our segments? For example, I know that I want to go after teachers in a brand like the Scholastic brand, right? I know I want to go after teachers. Do you believe in further segmenting that to, okay, I want to go to elementary school teachers and that's a segment. I want to go middle school. I want to go high school. I want to do college. Are you talking that? And then you can go even a level deeper with each one of the grades. So when you're talking about segmentation being a challenge, is it people aren't getting granular enough? And not by people, but brands aren't getting granular enough. Are you speaking specifically to that?
Yeah, that's correct. I see that at least many of the companies we speak with can go granular and they don't. So generally speaking, you have like just general audience, then you bring it down to a particular segment or market, a particular segment, then you can even bring it down to maybe a persona, buyer persona or any type of persona. And then you take it down like one step further to what I call the augmented buyer persona, which is when you have data about that particular individual. You understand the context, and you can automate these things. And based on that context, then you formulate the type of interaction, message, etc., that particular individual needs. Now, for the majority of organizations, this is just too much, and that's perfectly fine. There are many cases where you don't have to go that granular because it's not feasible, it's not practical, etc. Or maybe you don't have the tools to do that, which is perfectly fine. So whenever it is possible, segmentation should always be there, basically. And whenever it is possible, you should go to a particular persona, which is more or less what you were referring to a moment ago. And whenever it is possible, you should specify a bit more so that the message is truly relevant to the context of that particular individual. For example, I like the examples in the hospitality industry. When I travel by myself, and it's a business trip, I don't travel that much. I love staying at home, to be honest. But when I have to, if I book a hotel, my needs are totally different in terms of the type of room. If I need I don't like using public Wi-Fi. I have also because of company policy and stuff. But if I need Wi-Fi or not, or the restaurants, the budget, all those things are different. If I travel with my wife, maybe it's the same budget, same person. However, I need a different type of room, maybe a different type of transportation, a different budget maybe for the food, I don't know, and things like that. If I travel with my wife and my son, it's a totally different picture. So it is the same person, same client. However, in terms of what you would usually call, or the way companies would approach it through a CRM or even through a loyalty program would be exactly the same. So they would treat me as Josías. However, the same Josías has 3 different contexts. And whenever it's possible, the company should trace, let's say, or should track that context so that they can deliver the type of experience I need so that I am a loyal client, so that I expect more and I'm happier. I speak about the perfect service I have received and all those things a bit more. So same individual, different context. However, in the majority of the cases, based on this example too, I would be treated just as the client or the number or even Josías. Okay, maybe there is some personalization, but they won't take it down to why I'm traveling, if I'm by myself, if I've been there before or not, if it's weekend or if it's a weekday, how many days, what type of experience are a better fit for me because I'm going to be there for just one night or a full week or whatever. So the same applies to pretty much any industry. So insurance, banking, universities, and so on. Whenever it's possible, the more granular you take it, the better, because you are able to better engage, better communicate, and better help, better serve the individual on the other side of the screen. And that makes a huge difference in terms of lifetime value, in terms of that same person bringing new people on board because he or she is happy with the experience that is receiving. It makes communications more effective. Therefore, they are cheaper long-term because you don't have to make such a big effort, let's say, in one campaign because you've been working in the relationship with that person. A lot of this has to do with that initial segmentation, which then brings it to the messages and all those things. I don't know if that makes sense.
That's a fantastic example. And I think when you can segment that granularly, it does allow you to level up that level of personalization, right? I think what most brands do, in my opinion, this is what most brands can do, right? They are looking at their CRM. And in their CRM, I know that I have a name. I'm going to send out an email. If I know that they live in California, that's maybe as high level as I get, but I can send an email that includes their name and then talks about the weather in California, for example. Those are examples of really very general segmentation. But even to take your hospitality example to another level, if I know that you are traveling based on, I don't know, what type of room you get and then what you're asking for. If I know that you're traveling with your wife or maybe your son as well too, maybe I want to include 3 water bottles instead of the 2 standard that come in, right? I want to make sure that the cot is already in there without you having to ask. When you get to know your audience at the level that you're talking about, which I think is just the dream for a marketer to be able to get to that level, you are allowed to, not just allowed to, but you are now inserting like these moments of customer delight that do build that brand loyalty. So that was a fantastic example. Well, one, I love analogies. And two, I love the way that you've broken it down because it is true. You are the same Josías, but the situation is very different. And you have to take into account all of the different situations. I think when you look at your audience and even taking it to sales level, it's not just the end user, it's who is the entire buying committee, right? Like you have to take that into account. The end user maybe can see the value of what you're bringing to the table, but if they have to talk to the CFO and they have to talk to their immediate manager and they have to get buy-in from an associate, you now have to cater all of your marketing to help them be the champion internally. So I think that's a perfect example.
It's not impossible. So the thing is that I know that from an outside perspective, it sounds like, oh, this is too crazy for us. It does. But however, a lot of this has to do with a creative exercise in terms of, okay, what type of information can we gather in a way that is not intrusive or extremely intrusive in order to achieve X, Y, Z? So first, this is what we want to get. And we want to do this not just because we want to gather data, but this is where we want to get, which could be because we want to increase sales, or we want upsells, cross-selling, or whatever it is. So in order to make these messages more appealing to this particular segment, buyer persona, ornamented buyer persona, what type of information can we gather that either zero-party data, first-party data, etc., that zero-party data is the one that we own, we get, and first-party data is similar to that. Do not make it too complex. In the end, what type of information can we gather, and how can we gather this information little by little throughout the journey so that we can provide that experience? And in many CRMs, you would solve that by gathering tags, for example, or by putting people into little buckets or lists, or it depends on the tool you use. It's quite effective. For example, if a lead submits a web form and one of the answers is related to location, that's an easy one. You have the location, the specific location by city or whatever. If it is a car brand and in the web form, there is something that could tell us if it's like a sport car, or I have no clue about cars.
Interesting that you went down that road for your analogy, though. I'm definitely picking up what you're putting down because it's true. I think there's a misconception that in order to get the information that you need from your customer, it all has to come from one form. I think like that's the beauty about marketing, is that you can nurture them to get these opportunities. And if you're really slick about it, you can leverage content marketing to also get that, right? So if I'm developing a content marketing plan based on my customer journey, right? And I know kind of middle of the funnel and this is where they're at, and let's say have 10 different products, but this specific piece of content that I am asking if they are interested in tells me a little bit more about what their interests are in. It's a correlation. It's not them filling it out, but that's where you include the tags. So I think there's this misconception that it all has to come from one form and you have to ask them all of the questions. Like, do you have a dog? What's your favorite color? And what's your astrological signs? I do like that you mentioned that there are other ways to get it, that it could be something that's incremental. And I have to apologize. I did not expect to be talking so much about segmentation. Clearly, this is totally like very close to my heart about it. I do want to ask you though, let's say we get the segmentation all worked out. How do I then engage with my audience? How do I engage with them? But how do I get them to engage with me, right? Because I think that is 3/4 of the battle, honestly, because you said even at the top of the podcast, there are when we were talking just about youth, as consumers, we are being bombarded on such a regular basis on everything, whether it's TV, whether you're listening to a podcast, you're even reading probably a book on your tablet, right? Like you're consistently getting bombarded, and then you've got social media. So how, as a brand, do you suggest standing out from all of that noise?
It depends. I have 2 examples, and then I'll explain what I believe comes from those examples. The phone company I use at work and even in my personal life, is a company I've been with maybe telecommunications, maybe, I don't know, 8 years or something like that. And they are not the cheapest option. Spain is a really price sensitive market and there are many options. I don't even know how many companies are out there in telecommunications. There are many options. But the way they communicate is just really smart. And they're based on values and we won't bother you ever. They improve the service. They just communicate improvements. And they do that, I don't know how many times, maybe 4 times per year, etc. And I don't want to change. The time I tried to change to a better plan, they said, yeah, you don't need a better plan. And things like that, they don't bother me. They don't have to try to get me back as a client because they have kept their promise in terms of quality, service, and all those things. So that's one style. And that's their advertisement as well. So they say that. It's not that it's there behind the scenes and you get it. No, they say that and they publish what they consider those like their statement. And that has been their sales letter, let's say, for years now. There is this company, some kind of dental practice, and every year they send me maybe 1 or 2 messages to a lady's name. I don't know. I don't remember the name because they got my number wrong. So I just leave it there because I like marketing. So at least they try. I've never been a client of that company, but then the companies I've used for dental things or even insurance companies, they don't communicate with me at all. And it is extremely easy to just communicate throughout the year so that every year you go there and you do what you need to do. The same with an insurance company, whether you're traveling or all those things. Those are 2 different styles. So marketing, in my opinion, especially today, actually, should be a conversation. So this means that even legally speaking now, part of that conversation needs to be somehow initiated by the potential buyer, whoever that buyer is. Again, employee, student, customer, client, whoever. So that means that they have the option to start the conversation and I need to respond to that conversation. And the companies that do an extremely good job are those that somehow keep the wheel, let's say.
Flywheel, yeah.
That's correct. And that works extremely well. The problem with many organizations is that if a year has 12 months and every year has 12 months, they'll communicate, they'll have one big campaign and they'll put lots of effort in that big campaign. And sometimes it's just one email blast and that's going to be it. So the rest of the months are just empty in terms of interactions. So the way you communicate with them, the way you keep engaging with them, and the way you help them to connect with you is by constantly understanding their context and making sure that you are available to them and communicating based on how they advance in that journey with your organization, with your brand. Obviously, this depends. If you're talking about a dental practice, the example, I have no clue about that industry. But I would say that anything between maybe 4 communications throughout the year with best practices, etc. And have you considered coming out of things like that, tips, and etc. That would help quite a lot. I talked to my wife quite often about, I do not drive. I don't own a driver's license. So my wife is the one that drives, and we live in a mountain. So I need the car for pretty much everything here, but I walk a lot too. But the thing is that because we use the car quite a lot, we need to take the car to the mechanic quite a lot. Even this year, I told her, look, let's just create a CRM for mechanics because these guys do not communicate with us. It's extremely easy to simply let us know that we should take the car because X amount of kilometers or miles in the US. There are certain patterns that would allow the brand to communicate with us, and that would facilitate also that we communicate with them. And when you do that throughout the journey, it becomes a lot easier to simply ask them to buy from you if they have to upgrade or to bring new people on board or to give you feedback to so that you can enhance the product you're offering, etc. So there are many opportunities. A lot of that has to do with that conversation. And you need to make sure that you have an open channel or many open channels to make it easier for them to talk to you. And then don't leave it to just one campaign, but keep engaging with them throughout the journey through different interactions, which might be email, maybe a phone call, maybe face-to-face, maybe a physical letter, depending on the industry channel and so on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Like, I'm a big believer as well that it's not just like a lightning strike of like, it's not going to be, one email that's just going to send it over the edge, right? You do have to be consistent and you have to understand what they need and when they need it. The example that you gave was more of like a long-term cycle when you use like your mechanic, right? Because there are only specific touch points where they're like, oh, I know I can reach out to them, but I also don't need my mechanic to check on like how I spent my Christmas. I'm sure it would be nice, but it would seem very disingenuous because that's not the type of relationship we had. If that's what it was at the beginning, then I'd be more open to it. So what I'm hearing is be really consistent, be thoughtful with that consistency across the journey that they're on, the customer journey that they're on, and continue to create open opportunities for them to engage with you. Give them a reason to meaningfully engage and not necessarily to sell, which kind of brings me, oh my gosh, I know that we're so deep. I promise I have one second to last question for you because this is going to feed into just kind of this 80-20 rule, right? So that mechanic is reaching out to you because he knows that you need a service based on this miles, right? And that he's going to get something out of you, right? So I'm thinking this through from an 80-20 perspective, where I believe that this 80% of this relationship should be you being able to tell me things of value for me and the 20% being promotional. What are your thoughts on that, on leveraging this 80-20 to provide this open relationship, to provide engaging moments?
So we all like being served. And nowadays we all want to have or experience a great experience, let's say. And it is hard, not impossible, to demonstrate from a brand perspective that experience in one run, like in one shot, in one interaction. There is something called emotional motivators. These are basically the emotions and the way we feel. And there are over 300 of them. And there are around 10 top, let's say, emotional motivators that are extremely powerful. And you would see them over and over in TV commercials quite a lot. And things like even FOMO or what's for me in the future, that security or belonging, all those things are really important. So as individuals, as we advance, as we move forward, let's say with a product, a service, an idea, an ideology, whatever, our emotional motivator changes, or many of them change. So if I'm selling all the time, it is hard, not impossible, to successfully connect with my target audience, which could be one individual or 100 of them or 1,000,000 of them, through the type of emotion they need at that particular moment. However, I believe that obvious or not that obvious, there should always be some kind of call to action in the communications companies somehow share with their audiences. However, these calls to action are going to be sometimes, maybe that's that 20%. It's going to be like an obvious call to action. Call us now, as that's a really simple example. But sometimes it would be just a behind the scenes call to action, which means that because I've made it so easy for you to understand this, or because we really care about your future, because you care about the planet, we also care about the planet, etc. When I ask, it is a lot easier for you to work with us or whatever. You get the terminology depending if it is B2C, B2B, or B2B2C, and all those things. So the way I see it is that brands, regardless of the percentage, but brands that take into account the emotional motivator of their audience, depending on where they are at, like in that journey, are more successful, to the point that when they ask, it is a lot easier to ask because you've been working the relationship with them. And so think about it as a relationship. If you have my wife, she's really good at asking anyone for help. And in my case, I'm Panamanian, so Latino. So it maybe takes me longer to be able to just go, hey, can you help me with this? Because XYZ. Well, she goes and she just asks. In my case, I'm slower in that process. So I try to build the relationship, some kind of relationship, and then I'm able to ask unless it is a service, and then I simply ask. That's different. So similarly, for example, when my wife and I, when we got married, we had 2 years of relationship or 1 year of relationship or something like that many years ago. But prior to that stage, we had I'm talking boy, girlfriend, etc. But before then, we were best friends for many years. So then we simply decided to start the relationship, got engaged more or less right away, and then we got married about a year after that. So what I'm trying to say with this is that it's building the relationship that made the asking stage easier and then the next step easier. This obviously changes depending on the product you're selling, service you're selling, etc. But most audiences need some kind of relationship in order for them to take action, regardless of the service that you're selling. It's just that those that do it really well, when they ask, it is just a lot easier, quote unquote, for the buyer to simply jump in, let's say, and buy your offer. And you see this quite a lot, for example, in online education. A lot of people that have free content available, they have a great relationship with their audience to the point that when they ask, it just becomes easier for you to either buy a book or buy some kind of course or education or whatever it is. And the same happens with pretty much everything. That's what comes to mind.
I definitely agree. I also love that you have removed the 80-20 from my question and really honed in on the emotional indicators, because I do think that you're right. You do have to be able to focus. What do they need? Because that's what they're going to respond to, because you don't have to think about it, right? The emotion you feel right away, which is why emotional indicators is such a great way to look at it, is I'm going to react emotionally before it goes into my brain to think through. And I don't know all of the brain terminology, but I know that psychologically, that's how it works. We react emotionally first, and then we take the time to think about it, and then we're taking in all of the information. So when you can hone in on the emotions, I think it does make marketing a lot easier. But even to get to the emotional intelligence of what your audience is, it is all about building that relationship. Now, I feel bad because I have definitely had you on this line for way longer than I had intended. So I do apologize. I have one final question that I always like to close out. If you knew then what you know now, what is the marketing advice that you give to yourself?
Yeah, in my case, numbers, not data. That's easy when they give it to you. But again, get to your own numbers. That's harder. Numbers, sales, and coding. So I'm technical oriented. I've been surrounded by technical people for many years. I do code a little bit, but I cannot build or code a whole application by myself. So I would have lots of fun if I just could do it, because I have lots of things here.
So you'd want to be more technically driven so that you can build the things from scratch.
Probably, yeah.
I love that. I love that.
With my first company, we were third-party dependent. And that was one of the things that in the end didn't work that much or that well for us. And I think that if I had back then the mentality I have today in terms of this is possible, we can do it, let's work, and this is my investment and all these things, God willing, I think that it would have been different and I would have saved a few years in between. However, I have learned loads. So in the end, it's also related to numbers.
Yeah. I love that.
Relationships. I think that, partnerships and relationships and things like that, because my personality, I'm an introvert. I do okay, socially speaking.
We won't worry about you. This has been a good conversation. So very clearly you do well with people. But I love that. Numbers and partnerships, that's just kind of great advice. And, there's nothing like reflecting on where you've been to see all right, if I could go back, this is that one tidbit that I'd give to myself. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with you. Thank you so much. I think we got to 2 questions that I thought that we were going to get to, and that's it. But I've enjoyed it so immensely. Thank you so much for coming on here.
Thank you for having me.
I hope that you got just as engrossed at this episode as I did. What's ironic is I had so many more questions for him, and I know that we went really deep on segmentation. I've got no regrets. I do, however, have key takeaways for you. So let's get to it. My first key takeaway is, number one, you have to understand your audience. Now, understanding who you are trying to reach is really the critical part of marketing. I mean, it's at the heart of effective marketing. Part of that understanding really starts at the beginning of the business to ensure that you have a viable product or service and can truly make a business out of it. The next part is also about learning your audience and how they're engaging with you. For example, if you have a website, you're selling products, what do your website analytics tell you about your audience? What is their journey? Where do they live? What device are they using? And then getting really refined in knowing your audience goes beyond those analytics, but it does require a relationship where you're learning from them about them. Key takeaway number 2, there are challenges and opportunities in marketing. While I am sure you can get a different list from many different marketers, it really depends on who you reach out to, right? The ones we focused on in our discussion would be almost like in a Venn diagram for all marketers, in my opinion, right? There are 3 main challenges that we covered, and he points out that they are segmentation, serving the right content throughout the customer journey, and addressing internal silos. Now, honestly, I could literally do a whole other podcast with me, myself, and we're such a good company on those 3 alone. But what we really dove into was, like I said at the top, segmentation. And that is more than just demographics. It's knowing the same person can have different needs depending on variables. The example he used was him going out of town and checking into a hotel. There are 3 different experiences for him, right? One where he is by himself, one with just his wife, and another when he's with his wife and his kids. A hotel could learn these 3 different times and change the experience for each scenario. Now, that is taking the idea of segmentation to the next level. That's not just knowing what device they booked the room in. And my final key takeaway, it's not just about the numbers. There are emotions at play too. And don't get me wrong, there is such an importance of data. I am a data junkie, a data nerd. I love it. You have to be able to fight fact with fiction, right? Or not fact with fiction, fact with feeling. Ironic that I say that and also say that there are emotions at play. But emotional indicators are also really key for effective marketing. I mean, FOMO is not about data. It's about the fear, an emotion of missing out. People will react with their emotions first and then take the time to think about all the other information. So aim your strategies to drive emotional responses that help you drive them to convert. Now, I would love to hear what nuggets of insights you walked away with from today's episode. Drop a comment or leave me a review. I love reviews. Please review on Apple Podcasts. Also, don't be shy. Reach out to me via LinkedIn. I do respond. A special thank you to my podcast producers, the amazing team at Content Allies, and thank you for spending your time with me today. Until next time, may the conversation flow, the laughter linger, and the outlook remain optimistic but grounded in reality. This is Katya signing off.